We're ready? Okay. Microphone's on. Planning Commission meeting of September 8th, 2021 will come to order. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. My apologies for running late. Secretary will call roll, please.
Commissioner Hodge.
Here.
Commissioner Rice.
Here.
Commissioner Gray.
Here.
Vice Chairperson Tolson.
Here.
Chairperson Mann.
Here. May I have a motion for approval of the agenda?
Move to approve the agenda.
I have a motion by Commissioner Hodge. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Commissioner Rice. Unless there's any objections, the agenda stands approved. May I have a motion for the approval of the minutes?
So moved.
I have a motion by Commissioner Tolson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
I have a, well, we're going to give it to Commissioner Gray. I have a second by Commissioner Gray. May I have a, wrong thing. Motion was, okay, unless there's any objections, the minutes are approved. Declaration of conflict. The secretary will read the declaration of conflict, please.
If any member of the Planning Commission may have a conflict of interest or any reason why that member must abstain from consideration of any matter on this agenda, he or she should so declare at this time.
Are there any declarations of conflict? Hearing none. Public statements. This is the time allotted for public statements or comments or all items other than public hearing items. Due to the closure of City Council chamber to the public in compliance with provisions of Governor's Executive Order N-2920, public statements are to be accommodated via Zoom. Did we receive any requests from any individuals who would like to make a public statement?
Chairman, no, we have not. We have received correspondence, however, for public statements.
Okay, moving on. Is there any correspondence from the Deputy Director, City Planner?
Let me back up. Under public statements, we did receive one correspondence, which was provided to you on the dais and sent to your email boxes this afternoon under public statements.
Okay. Now we go to correspondence. Okay. Is there any correspondence from the Deputy Director, City Planner?
No other correspondence.
Consent calendar, I have nothing on the consent calendar. I have nothing on continued business. And we have one item of new business, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. This is the time and place set for the public hearing on the consideration of ZS 2021-0004 to amend portions of Title IX of the Simi Valley Municipal related to voluntary mergers and the determination that the amendment is exempt from the from the California Environmental Quality Act. Are there any ex parte communications to report? Hearing none, may we have an oral report on this matter by staff?
Good evening, Chairman Mann and members of the Planning Commission. Yeah, this item tonight is a text amendment to our development code regarding what's called voluntary lot mergers. It's one of the several subdivision processes we do to bring properties of land into conformity. And tonight we have our Associate Planner, Cesar Hernandez, with a presentation, and our Assistant Public Works Director, Brent Seamer, is on Zoom tonight to answer any follow-up questions. So with that, I'll turn over the presentation to Mr. Hernandez.
Thank you, City Planner, and good evening, Planning Commission. And before I start, just want to make sure the commissioners and any folks who are zoomed in, that they could see the screen.
I can
And
see it.
I can see it.
Okay, good. Thank you. The proposed code amendment is to allow voluntary mergers to be consistent with the State Map Act. A lot merger is when two or more parcels are combined into a single legal parcel, which currently can be initiated by the city. A voluntary merger is a lot merger that can be initiated by the property owner. Currently, the city's existing process to merge parcels follows the procedure for a lot line adjustment, where a certificate of compliance is issued if approved. Lot mergers can only be initiated by the city, and there are no provisions for voluntary mergers. This is an example of a lot merger where, say in this case, the commercial structure was built across your property line and does not conform to the city's zoning or building codes. Whether to improve, expand the building, or for financial reasons, this code amendment will allow the property owner to initiate a voluntary merger of the two properties that will help bring the building into compliance. Currently, the city's existing process to merge parcels follows the procedures for a lot line adjustment where a certificate of compliance is issued if approved. The County of Ventura allows voluntary mergers which allow the city to be consistent with the county. Now, additionally, smaller lots can be consolidated to provide for smart growth and the development opportunities. And Public Works has received such requests in accordance with the Subdivision Map Act. Voluntary mergers will allow property owners initiated mergers for two or more properties that are under the same ownership and allow the property owner to further develop their property by meeting setbacks or density requirements. The proposed text amendment will allow a ministerial process for voluntary mergers unless it's concurrently processed with other development applications. Additionally, it removes the appeal period as they are deemed ministerial voluntary actions. Prior to recording the voluntary merger, any party involved can withdraw the request or not proceed with the recordation of the deeds that effectuate the voluntary merger. And here are the proposed application procedures and guidelines. The application process would be an administrative procedure, and the application form would be a certificate of compliance. Applications will be reviewed by the Planning Division and the Public Works Department. Applications must comply with building safety codes and the zoning ordinance. Ultimately, the city engineer would review the application for compliance with the standards in the proposed ordinance and is the decision maker and will have the discretion to impose any conditions. This is Table 6.1 of the Simi Valley Municipal Code. It identifies the advisory agency for each type of subdivision, the role of each advisory agency and other review authority in the map process. In all cases, the review authority shall have the authority and the responsibility to make all required findings and approve, conditionally approve, or disapprove the matters assigned to them. This table will be modified to include voluntary mergers as shown in the bold red text. So looking from left to right, the advisory agency would be the city engineer, and the role of advisory agency review authority, the planning director would recommend. But once again, the decision would lie on the city engineer. Under the provisions of Section 15061, B3 of the California Environmental Quality Act guidelines, the proposed ordinance is exempt from CEQA. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council approval of Z-2021-004. This concludes staff's presentation. Staff will be available to answer any questions, including Mr. Brent Steamer, who is zooming in.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. Do any of the commissioners have any questions of staff? Commissioner Rice?
Mr. Hernandez, so what if the two parcels in question have different zoning?
If they have different zoning, then we're looking at a zone change in addition to that process.
So could that be handled as an administrative, or is that something that would go to the planning commission if there's a zone change?
That would have to go to planning commission.
Okay, and that's in the text of the amendment? Because I didn't see it. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, it's not included in this because it's its own process. Brent could explain the difference of, say, a merger versus, say, a zone change. Zone changes specifically have to do with planning division.
Okay.
If I may interrupt really quickly, in addition, and Mr. Zimmer, maybe you can follow up after this, the section that says that it will be, it could also be processed with the concurrent applications, that one of them will be a zone change, because we need to make sure that it also is consistent with the general plan, so it may be something that is more extensive, so it may not be ministerially. So that's something that will be looking at as a complete package versus just, the merger by itself.
Okay, so can I give you a hypothetical maybe and then go from there if that works? Okay, so this is just hypothetical, but let's say somebody has a 5-acre parcel and it's zoned, or they built it and it has 30 units on it, okay, and they want to they want to add this other 5-acre parcel they have next to it to make it a 10-acre parcel. But if now the 10 acres, because of the zoning, they could have 100 buildings on that whole property, does that mean they could put 70 on this other parcel? It's all one parcel now, so does that mean they could have a whole bunch in a smaller piece, even though the other one maybe has quite a bit less?
It is a very general example. There's obviously a lot of variance,
sure,
whether
sure.
it's HPS and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But technically, in theory, if you merge two properties and now you have the 10 acres,
Correct.
yes, you can increase your density. Obviously, you have to look at everything else.
The more restrictive zoning would apply.
Yes.
So if there's two zones on one lot, the more restrictive zone would apply.
Okay.
To immediately solve the concern.
Okay. All right. All right. I maybe have another question in the future, but I'm gonna.
Okay, we'll get back to you. Any other commissioners have any other questions?
Yes.
Please, Commissioner Hodge.
Yeah, I want to follow up on what Commissioner Rice just asked, because I see some opportunities for mischief if we don't put this language in the document that we're being asked to approve something, and there's language that I think needs to be included to address the issue that Commissioner Rice just brought up, and I'll give you a sort of slightly different, the same sort of hypothetical but slightly different. So if you had two parcels, one's built out entirely and the other one's not built out. I own the one that's not built out at all. And they're both, my property is median, I think it's median. Median's up to 10 units, correct? 5, all right, so it's moderate then. They're both zone moderate. You can build up to 10, correct? So there's the piece of property next to me that has 30 units on it, and it's also moderate. But it was built at a density of 6 units per acre and not the maximum of 10. It was just built to 6. But every square inch of the property is developed. So I've got this open property next door, and I say, you know what? If I buy that property and then eliminate the line in between to make it one parcel, that parcel is now 10 acres. I can build up to 10 units per acre. And even though my property, which is, I would have a maximum of an opportunity to build 50, now I would have an opportunity to build 70 on that property because I'm looking at the whole parcel, next door neighbor's parcel that I don't own, but I buy it. And now I've got one parcel that's 10 acres. and it's moderate density, and I can build up to 10, 30's built, 70 can go on that property, the 5 acres that I have. So you have this opportunity for a significant increase in density in that one property that I don't think anybody's intending to do. I mean, that's like the most aggressive form that I can think of, because you'd actually have to buy that other property. But once you do, if it's for sale and you're able to put up the right number, you now have this opportunity to do quite a bit of chicanery, I think, with our density plans and build up to 70 on that. Is that something? There's nothing in the language that says that you couldn't do that.
Well, if I may, actually, for one thing, you had to own both properties, and they have to
That's
be
why you buy it.
contiguous.
That's
So
why you buy
them
the
both.
property next door, in my
And
hypothetical.
we do have language in the code that says that the planning director has to make a recommendation. And if it's the same zone, whether they're separated or together, you can still basically technically build the same amount of units depending of various reasons.
Yeah, I saw the language in there about the recommendation and that the engineer has the final say, so that is the decision maker. The thing that I think that we all agree on is that the planner has to have findings and has to apply the reality to a rule and come up with a finding that would allow the planner to say, I recommend against this. And then what's the engineer supposed to do? If the engineer's recommendations that are included within the ordinance that that we're looking at is silent as to these issues. So I'm hopeful that we can come up with some sort of language that could address these kinds of issues so that it would be possible for the planning department to defend with findings a recommendation against a particular project, and that the city engineer who has the decision-making would also be able to, based upon that recommendation, say no. As it stands now, without that language, I'm concerned about somebody, going the aggressive route with, and we've seen it before, their own attorneys and saying, you can't stop me. You can't stop me. There's nothing in here that allows you to do that.
Maybe Mr. Simmer can speak to the Subdivision Map Act and what requirements are in the merger. But like I mentioned earlier, the planning director has, the planning division will have a say-so in the matter, and if it's a recommendation that it does not, is not advisable, we can make the recommendation to the city engineer, and the city engineer can approve or not approve, or approve with conditions regarding the property to be merged. And in addition to that, like I said, if everything is the same zoning, then it's a one process. If they want to upzone, there's a different process, and it's no longer this voluntary, streamlined or easier process. They have to go through the concurrent entitlement. So, Mr. Sirma, I don't know if you want to add any other information on the MAP Act.
Okay, not having all those other legal requirements in the MAP Act, et cetera, before us and to review, I'm going to defer to you because this is something I didn't have a chance to review or to evaluate. But it does seem to me that we're still missing something, and that in order for the planning department to not only support a recommendation, but to have some guidance as to what it was that we were actually recommending and wanting to approve. There's going to be different people up here one day, and we want to, if we're going to recommend something, have a rule or a set of guidelines that will be available to someone else who one day replaces, Mr. Gibson, et cetera, and we'll have some guidance as to what it was that we really wanted, as opposed to an opportunity to do something which wasn't what we're really recommending. So I'd like to see some additional language in that. I'd like to switch gears real quick and talk about the appeal process. There's this particular new language eliminates the appeal process, correct?
No.
I thought it said very specifically in here. It says on page 2, final paragraph, under proposed municipal code amendments, halfway down, in the middle, almost dead center of the paragraph, the proposed ordinance also removes the appeal period for voluntary mergers as they are ministerial voluntary actions that reduce developmental potential and are typically requested by a single property owner or involve cooperating adjacent property owners. Is that still, is that an accurate description of what the ordinance does?
That is an actual description that's in line with Ventura County language. Again, if this happened to be, it's still going to be reviewed for completeness and for additional information from planning. So if there's any zoning issues, that will be our opportunity to look at it. Otherwise, if it's a straightforward voluntary merger that doesn't affect any other areas, then it will be this will be the case. And again, this is following Ventura County and also the Subdivision Map Act.
Okay, you know,
Maybe
have-
Mr.
I
Zimmer
have-
can
I
explain
have
that better.
tinnitus.
Maybe.
I have tinnitus when coupled with masks. I'm having a little bit difficult time understanding you, and
I'm
it's not your
sorry.
fault.
So it's actually so I apologize. Maybe actually, you know what? It's better that Mr. Zimmer probably answers that question because he has to do more with the Subdivision Map Act and also with the Ventura County, what they're doing right now. Mr. Zimmer, could you please answer that question?
It looks like Mr. Seamer has bowed out for the moment. Perhaps he's on the phone. I'll try to unmute this person who's called in.
Well, while we get him, I'll try to speak a little bit more clear. So basically, the Subdivision Map Act, if it's a straightforward voluntary merger, you're correct. The process that there will be no appeal and it will be a ministerial process. However, if it's something that's more complicated that the planning division has looked at and we need more information, it's not just a straightforward voluntary merger, then that's where things can change and we can actually recommend further review. And it could be part of a package of entitlement applications.
Well, I couldn't find the amendment process.
Oh, there's Mr. Zimmer, he's raising his hand.
Okay.
Somebody high-five him and answer him.
Mr. Seamer, you have permission to talk.
You might be that phone number there, asked to unmute star
They're both
star
muted.
9, I believe.
They're both muted.
That person's gone.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
If you're Brent, we can hear
Finally.
you.
Yes, okay. This is Brent Seamer, Deputy Public Works Director, Public Works. And technology was fighting me. It threw me out. I couldn't even hear anything. So anyway, back on process. I'll answer both questions that's going on. The question about the appeal process is that the documents that we're talking about, the certificates that are issued by the city engineer, are basically the same documents that we would use for a lot line adjustment. Those are traditionally a ministerial process. Those move lines around. Those have been used for many, many different projects. Our code considers those to be ministerial. And so the mergers have also been considered the same thing because it's essentially moving a line by removing it. So that would be the premise for why it's an appeal. To answer the question that both Commissioners Rice and Hodge brought up in regards to pretty much the timing, I think the concern is if the city engineer were to act first and to allow a piece of property to merge, then all of a sudden the zoning doesn't match up and it allows someone to do something. So I would recommend, since the requirement is that it has to be under the same ownership for the city engineer to issue the certificate, that you just say it has to also be under the same zoning. That would prevent us from recording anything that would have two zonings on the property, and it would require that the individual either gets a zoning change or has to wait for the city to change. But that would allow that process to be required before a merger could happen. So if that happens, that would be the simple language that you could add to the ordinance. And I don't see any problem if planning feels that that would kind of close the barn door that our two commissioners are concerned with.
Mr. Seamer, may I follow up with you?
Certainly.
Okay. I think that what you just said would address the specific issue that Commissioner Rice brought up about if there were, the zoning wasn't consistent. Drilling down a little bit to the hypothetical that I came up, and I admit that it's probably going to, would be an unusual circumstance, but I'd like to address these things in advance as opposed to wait for it to pop up. If the zoning is the same and somebody manages to move a lot line, and so the parcel goes from 5 acres to 10 acres like we talked about before, and the developed 5 acres has 30 units, with the undeveloped 5 acres inure to the benefit of in essence, the unbuilt units in the first 5 acres. And would the second undeveloped 5 acres be able to develop to 100 units if that was the total density allowed for the whole 10 acres?
So as to a specific rule, all the certificate would do would be tell a title company that this is one parcel, and that individual could now come into planning and request whatever they want. So if it was ministerial, that they could then request the highest density, or there were some other issues, then yes, pretty much an issue. What you'd be relying on would be the city planner, the environmental services director to say, no, we don't want this to happen. So that might be a little difficult for that person to do if the property owner feels they have a right. So I'm not quite sure that we could close that up, except for an assurance that if the planning department saw that as an issue, that they would place a condition on the certificate saying that certain things must happen before the certificate could be recorded. So that's the kind of the lock and key that we have. So even if the city engineer were to say everything's in order, we can describe this as one parcel now, the environmental services director could say, no, this is a condition that must be met before that is recorded. So that would be essentially trusting staff to prevent some egregious development from occurring.
And in light of things such as the Housing Accountability Act and some other options for developers to pry certain developments into the city, would you agree that language that would provide an opportunity for the planning department to make findings, or the planning commission to make findings, or the city council to make findings, would support making sure that this kind of thing doesn't happen?
Yes, certainly. The whole intent of the law is to ensure that the planning function of the city can be exercised before the certificate is recorded. So if you would like to tighten up the planning aspects of this, certain findings that the director must make, that would certainly be fine. It would not compromise what the city engineer has to accomplish, but it would certainly give and articulate more decisions or more control to the environmental services director.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions from any other commissioners of staff?
I have one other question.
By all means, please.
Chairperson. When we look at these kind of projects, what generally is the size that we anticipate for lot mergers? I mean, is this something where somebody's taking 2 quarter-acre parcels and trying to make a half acre? Is it somebody who's trying to take a 10-acre and a 3-acre? I mean, what is the anticipation for something like this?
I think Mr. Seamer is best to answer that because he knows about those firsthand.
Okay.
So the types of inquiries that have made would be substandard lots that someone has acquired and would wish to merge a number of them together so that they would have lots of sufficient size to meet zoning in which to build a home on. So that's been one. Others we would have, for some reason, the lot has a building was built across the lot, and they need to remove that line in order to make the improvements to their gas station to add some square footage, but the structure is in violation. So it would be, your quarter acre, corner lot type of thing. The other one would be, say, 2 lots on Patricia. And instead of building one skinny project, they put 2 of them together. But because they're wanting to do apartments, they really don't want to go through the thousands of dollars just to have a map to say it's one lot. They could merge it, and then that would allow them more flexibility in design rather than to have 2 soldier row structures, one on one side and one on the other. They could come up with a more creative solution that would cross that line. So those are the types of inquiries that I have seen so far, but it's mostly infill development where we're now getting to the point of small pieces of property, combining 2 small parcels to be able to make them developable, or something that could be improved to meet the city's newer standards. Those are the types of things. I'm not seeing someone wanting to combine, tens of acres. It's mostly these small acreages that might be of a peculiar shape or something, where if they can add them together, then they can make a much more reasonable development.
Thank you.
Any other questions offhand? Okay.
I do.
Oh,
I do.
Commissioner Tolson, please
There you
go
go.
ahead.
So on page 2, it talks about properties that were illegally subdivided. How in the drawing, first drawing of your presentation showed the same thing where we're moving a line between 2 parcels. How can a property be built illegally under our current system?
Mr. Sherman, do you want to answer that? My answer will be that was probably built a long time ago under county, but maybe you have a better.
Yeah, it's like, sure. Commissioner Tolson, what the situation has been in the past is that the county or even the city, in years past, has not had a merger process. And so the building department would allow a property owner to simply provide a letter saying, for all intents, the lots are tied and they will be sold together. So that was allowed by building departments in the past to kind of just ignore the property line. A couple problems with that: it was never recorded, which means then a subsequent buyer or third or fourth down the line is oblivious to this situation. And then secondly, it's just that the law has gotten tighter, and our building department, certainly at this point, will not allow anyone to use this kind of antiquated approach to just give a letter saying that these lots are tied. So that's pretty much kind of put the property owners in handcuffs. They need to do a merger. They can't use some sort of contrived method of building across the line anymore.
Thank you very much. Next question is on the next page, number 3, there's the grid with all the different table number 6-1. And the one that's been in red was the voluntary mergers. And it's under planning commission, it says appeal. How would that happen? I mean, is any decision from a city engineer going to be sent to the planning commissioners so that we could potentially appeal it or not? How would that happen?
What I would understand would be is that the city engineer places any conditions or city engineer could reject and say, no, we will not merge the property. So it would be that property owner who would go to the next higher level to appeal the decision of the city engineer. So the decision would not be something that was appealable by a neighbor, but it would be the property owner who was felt that they were not being treated fairly by the city engineer. This gives them an ability, should the city engineer ever act capriciously, the planning commission could rescue the citizen.
Okay, thank you very much. Assuming that we know about it, unless someone comes to us with a challenge on that, I guess. Now, next page 4, it talks about the merger shall not affect any fees. Is there different fees, or is it a standard set of fees, or is each parcel, let's make this fee for this one and this fee for that one, or how does that work?
Right now, we don't have an official fee. We have to go to the council and have a fee established for it. We'll have to identify the cost. So it'll be probably similar to what the cost of a lot line adjustment is. But right now, it was not identified. So we're going to have to quickly generate a fee.
So that may be included with what we're going to recommend to the city council, I guess?
I don't have that fee amount created at this time.
Okay. And the last comment, which is similar to what Commissioner Hodge was talking about, the 2 lots, 5 acres each, one with 30, one with 0. They try to merge, pick up that line, it becomes a 10-acre lot. And then he sells it to somebody. There may be some conditions on it, but all of a sudden now the guy who's bought it puts us in a situation like we've seen this year where their real estate attorney says, pound sand, we're building 70 units on it. That's just my concern.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. That's it.
Yeah, my recommendation is to put that into the hands of the city planner, Sean Gibson, and give him as much authority as you would like to. Right now, it's somewhat limited to just say, does it currently comply with city zoning and general plan? You could establish a higher finding. It would not compromise the state map act one bit.
So I could,
I'm sorry. So how do we do that?
I have an idea.
Oh.
I think that we should give the city attorney's office and the planning department an opportunity to work on it, to build in the consistency in zoning language, which I think everybody agrees is something that should be in there, as opposed to sort of, laying in the weeds. I'd like to see that up front and, maybe some lights on it. I mean, I think it's an important one. And then this other opportunity to establish some sort of guidance so that the persons such as Mr. Gibson and those who come after him are able to defend their position and have some sort of guidance that they could make findings that could be supported, so that we don't have this sort of problem. I don't envy anybody the opportunity to actually do that writing. I think it's going to take some care, but I'd love to see us continue this to a date and certain so that they could make those additions to the language, bring it back, focus on those things, and then send it on its merry way. I think this is an excellent proposal, and I really commend the people who came up with the idea, because it's simplifying the process, and it's got so much more opportunity for good than it does for ill. But it's got a little opportunity for ill, and I think if we can strike that out, then we've done our jobs. And once again, if you guys thought of it or you thought of it, bully for you. I mean, it's excellent. This is the kind of thinking that I think that we are happy to see, and it deserves, a pat on the back and an approval down the road, and it'll help a lot of folks. But I would like to see some of these other issues squeaked out of it.
Any other questions? Commissioner Rice?
Well, it just, one of the things that, since Mr. Senior brought it up, is that, and we're talking about these weird shaped parcels and stuff like that, and somebody trying to build a house or a couple of houses on something, I think we need to find a way to make that easier, because, I mean, what a nightmare that is when you have some odd shaped parcels and you're trying to figure out how you can do it. So on these very small parcels like that, maybe a home or two homes or something would actually only work there. I think we need to make that as simple as possible. But for any of these other things that we're talking about, I agree 100% with Commissioner Hodge that it's just, I just would like the language to be a little more specific, maybe?
Defined.
Defined, yes, that's the word I was looking for. Thank you. That's it.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. 2 lots each have their own assessor's parcel number. You combine them together, one of those assessor's parcel numbers falling by the wayside?
Once the county assessor sees these certificates, then they wait for a deed. But usually the certificate is a process where they actually eliminate both numbers and assign a brand new number to the newly configured lot.
What happens if somebody has a lien against, or an encumbrance, or a deed restriction, or anything against one or both of those properties? What happens to that deed that's against that assessor's parcel number when that parcel no longer exists? Does it just transfer over?
So that would be a condition of approval. We could not record unless the encumbrance covers both. So that's an obligation of the applicant to arrange for that. And if they're unable to do that, then there is no merger.
Okay. Liens transferred to which one? Okay, that's my only question. Do we have any other questions of staff? Okay,
If I may
Please.
add a comment. Under section G, page 13, standards of approval, and then you move on to page 14. That's an area that we probably could add language regarding if something to the effect that the properties to be merged to be of the same zoning, but also add the language that technically the property owner, if you buy up 2 properties that the different zoning, they have the ability to request a zone change. So that's the only thing that I will add to it. So one thing is to have the same zoning, but also allow the property owner to be able to apply for a zone change, which also will bump it into another category of application.
okay.
Mr. Gibson, I don't know if you have some better idea on language, or Mr. O'Connell.
Yeah, the consistent zoning could be one of them, but I did want to point out that we're merging properties already. It's through the parcel map subdivision process. So this is not a new thing that's coming about. I want to point out that there are general plan policies and zoning standards which encourage lot consolidation, and this would assist in that process. So Commissioner Hodge, your example is a very good one and something that could absolutely happen. It could be going from 1 house to 4 houses instead of 10 to 40. There's a lot smaller instances. For example, we have scenarios out here with there's 1 house on a 10-acre lot, and because of this lot line which needs to be merged, he just wants a developer wants to build 3 additional houses but needed to do a lot merger. So things like that happen all the time. So these projects still go through the plan development process for consideration. The I lost my train of thought. Goes through the plan development process. The density is still allowed by zoning, and, you know, to maximize development of the property, you will see an increase in density. We're doing that now on our RVH zoning in Patricia Avenue, where some of this stuff happens. So, you know, potentially there's, you know, development will come to you, but it does achieve certain policies on housing element and general plan to maximize densities in the zone where density is allowed.
Yeah, and I can live with that, and I think that that's probably a good thing, so long as the acreage is ultimately being developed consistent with its zoning. But where you have this, I agree, unusual hypothetical, and Ken and I talked about it beforehand tonight, and he actually came up with the same thought before the meeting. You have an opportunity for people to require the city to allow them to build beyond the density as it's currently zoned. And that's the mischief that I think that we should address. So the suggestion that you just came up with, this sounds like a perfectly excellent use of adjusting the lot lines, making it possible for an intelligent use of land to be built at the zone that it's intended to be, and just sort of avoiding these little inconsistencies that are created by who knows how those lot lines got drawn, who knows how long ago. But you get into a situation where if, for example, perhaps the city attorney could come up with some language, or the planning department come up with some language that suggests that, that these things can be done, ministerially, they are looked at, and the planning department will look at it, and include as a condition that the property will not be built in that circumstance beyond the current density, as opposed to using the math to do things that we really don't want them to do in certain parcels. And that's what I'm hopeful, I realize that it's going to slow this process down maybe a month or two. I don't know if that's going to really, be a big time problem for anybody. I hope it's not. And I realize it's going to be a little bit of work and maybe a couple of bare aspirins for somebody, maybe even an Excedrin. And I'm sorry for that. But at the same time, I really think it's something that we need to address, and it's appropriate for us to do so.
Yeah, we can certainly come back with that. And my other point is that when we review these lot merger requests, we apply the zoning standards in place where there's little or no discretion to make a judgment call. So if the project complies with the zoning, the minimum density, the lot size, lot setbacks, height limits, et cetera. So those are the standards we do when we do look at these zoning lot mergers or lot line adjustments of those natures. So there is we just make sure it conforms with compliance. So if this is continued to look at that, we will look at all those standards and see what we come up with.
That's excellent, and I'm very much appreciative. There's a really good line. I'm not saying that I'm Lincoln, but there's a really good line in the movie Lincoln where he goes and talks to that guy Bilbo, and he says, "What a joy to be comprehended." And thank you so much. Obviously you get it. You get what we're saying, and I appreciate that very much.
Okay. If we have no more questions from any commissioner or staff, we're going to open the public testimony portion of the hearing. Is there anybody on Zoom that wants to weigh in or has any questions? Because there's nobody in the chamber.
There is not.
Okay, that was pretty good. Any comments of staff regarding statements made during public hearing? No. Any further questions before I close public testimony? That's pretty simple. We're closing the public testimony. Are there any other comments or questions from members of the Planning Commission? Back to you all. Nope.
Do you have any?
From the comments made during the public hearing?
No, I thank you, Commissioner Hodge and Commissioner Rice, for your comments. We definitely take that into consideration in developing the language. Sometimes, us as planners is straightforward, but I understand when sometimes it's better to be more precise and cover those bases so we don't have to have misinterpretation later on. So I appreciate those comments.
Yes.
Yeah, and if I could follow up, and Commissioner Hodge touched on it regarding the Housing Accountability Act, it does constrain the city's ability to add conditions, especially if it already complies with the zoning and all that. So we may just be limited to public health or safety issues in the conditions, but that's something that we can explore.
Okay, thank you. Okay, may I please, well, actually, because we had touched on a quote-unquote continuance versus putting it through for a motion. So since I've been off the dais for almost 2 months now, we just go for resolution and motion, and is continuance one of the motions that somebody could make? Okay, I'm getting the nod of approval from Commissioner Rice. Okay, may I please have a reading of the resolution?
A resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Simi Valley recommending to the City Council approval of Development Code Amendment ZS 2021-0004, amending Title IX of Simi Valley Municipal Code to provide procedures for voluntary mergers and a determination that the project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act.
Thank you very much. The chair will now entertain a motion.
I move to continue the matter to a date uncertain to allow staff to address the issues brought up by the commission.
Motion was made by Commissioner Hodge. May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Rice. Discussion?
The only thing I wanted to add, and I think I already said it, but people who have these really odd-shaped parcels, I think whatever we can do to make that easier, whatever we can do to grandfather in, some of these properties that are, I don't know, we'll say illegal or need to be brought into compliance rather, we need to do that. But, we've got to feel a little gun shy with some of the projects that we've had no control over and citizens aren't very happy with. So anything we can do to be very specific and definitive on, I think we need to do that. So that's it.
I would agree. Checks and balances are good, unfortunately, to protect the orphan lots that are out there. Yeah. We kind of have put into consideration what somebody could do to go the other way.
Correct.
Commissioner Tolson, Commissioner Gray, any comments?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're not being too restrictive. I'm looking at some of these properties that, as you guys have brought up in the past, some of the situations, and I was not around when some of the prior projects had come through. That sometimes you guys, your hands were tied in some of those situations, but I am looking at some of them, and I just want to make sure that in some of these odd-shaped parcels, I understand what you're talking about. In regards to making something from, a medium density to a high density just by the one scenario. But I also want to make sure that it's not taking a scenario where possibly somebody does have an odd shaped lot that they weren't able to possibly build originally or not able to build today. I just want to make sure we're not tying our hands too tightly on those types of lots where people have had to make some considerations with triangle shapes or even some of the stranger shapes that I'm looking at online, that they have the ability to still bring in what is needed for the residents of Simi Valley, which we do need more housing and apartments and those types of things without, again, the abuse that you guys are explaining. I just want to make sure we're not tying our hands too tightly when we come back at a future date with some wording.
Okay, point noted. Okay, there's a motion for continuance to a date uncertain to give staff some time to add in a little bit of language to make it per our conversations or per our discussions.
To address the issues brought up by the commission.
Thank you very much. Very professional. Call for the vote. We're voting to continue to a date uncertain. Staff will then come up with a date, correct?
It'd be date uncertain.
Okay. Those on the dais?
Vice Chairperson Tolson,
Yes, please.
Commissioner Gray,
Yes.
is everyone logged in? Okay, the motion passes and this matter will be continued to a date uncertain.
Thank you, staff, for all your hard work and dedication. I think just tighten it up a little bit without being too restrictive, because like Commissioner Gray said, we don't want to be too restrictive, but something just fine tune it just a tiny bit. Okay, moving on. I can get to my agenda somewhere. No new business. Oh, thank you. Public hearings, other oral communication report. Staff. Does staff have anything to report? Thank you.
Chairman, members of the commission, welcome back from your planning commission hiatus. The couple items. Two of you are signed up for the American Planning Association California chapter conference next week via online. If anyone's still interested, let me know tomorrow. We could still probably try to get you on there. It is a 3-day online event, so please take note of that. Also, we have a cancellation of our September 22nd Planning Commission meeting, but we expect to have a special Planning Commission meeting on September 29th. And tentatively, that would be the housing element update. So we should know very soon if that's going to be ready to go on the 29th. And also, we should also have a busy October, including a potential item from the Tree Advisory Board. So we'll give you some information on that. Also, we sent out an email on harassment training for the planning commissioners. And I believe that's being rescheduled to an online format, so you'll probably get sent updated instructions to complete your required harassment training. And I believe that's all I have.
Do any commissioners have anything to report? Mobile Home Rent Mediation Board?
No items?
Tree Advisory Board?
No items tonight.
This concludes the meeting of September 8th, 2021. The next scheduled meeting, as it stands, is October 6th. We may have a special meeting on September 29th, which I'm assuming if we do, the 10-6 meeting will probably be canceled, and that will put us back to 10-20, or we would keep the 10-6 too.
We have items for 10-6 already.
Got it. Okay, so the next scheduled meeting is 10-6, possibly be back here on September 29th. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, one and all.